Welcome to RYSA 2020. This is the Teaching Multilingual Learners module for peer mentors. The objectives of this module are stated in the Peer Mentors Will Be Able To, or PMWBAT format. So the objectives are that peer mentors will be able to describe what a linguistically supportive approach is and why it is important for English language learners. Peer mentors will be able to identify key concepts and 8 foundational theories of linguistically supportive teaching. And last, peer mentors will be able to apply key concepts and knowledge of 8 foundational theories of linguistically supportive teaching to ensure that RYSA 2020 students can both access and express their learnings. Now, take a peek at our agenda for this module. First, let's begin by our introduction and grounding in purpose. At RYSA, we have 3 informing mindsets: culturally responsive education, trauma-informed education, and linguistically supportive education for multilingual learners. Together, these create the foundation of our RYSA culture and climate. In this quote, Jeff Duncan Andrade states that Tupac Shakur in 1999 referred to young people who emerge in defiance of socially toxic environments as the roses that grew from concrete. Educators committed to material hope engage in their work by tempering this reality with the acknowledgement that there is always cracks in the concrete. The quality of our teaching, along with the resources and networks that we connect our students to, are those cracks. At RYSA, we know that quality teaching for multilingual learners means linguistically supported teachers and linguistically supportive education. Now, let's learn what is linguistically supportive teaching. Linguistically supportive teaching at RYSA looks like teaching English language learners, or ELLs, English grammar and vocabulary while teaching academic content, such as math or social studies. The goal of linguistically supportive teaching at RYSA is for teachers to integrate academic English language development into all of their lessons, allowing multilingual learners to learn and practice English vocabulary and grammar in all of their classes. Now we will learn, what does a linguistically supportive teacher ask themselves? But first, let's take a peek at what a traditional teacher might ask themselves. Only, what am I teaching? On the other hand, a linguistically supportive teacher asks themselves all of the following questions. Who am I teaching? What am I teaching? How will I teach it? And how will I know if the students in my class understand? Now, let's learn about 8 key concepts and foundational theories. Here's our list of 8 key concepts and foundational theories. The first that we will learn about today is looking at the distinction between language learning versus language acquisition. Language learning can be defined as the process by which we become aware of the rules of the target language, in this case, English. On the other hand, language acquisition is the subconscious process of encoding the subtleties of language and how that language is used in a cultural context into long-term memory. Let's zoom into language learning. Language learning is that process by which we become aware of the rules of a target language. Take a look at the GIF here of Bart. Bart is perhaps sitting in his high school Spanish class. Many students across the United States participate in language classes, especially in upper school. But very few of them actually acquire that language and become proficient speakers of that language for the rest of their lives. That is probably because, like Bart here in this GIF, they were missing the context in which to embed and apply that language. Instead, maybe they only learned the rules of that language, and the only circumstance in which they could apply it was sitting inside of a classroom. This leads to no long-term encoding of that language into long-term memory. Now, on the other hand, let's zoom into language acquisition. Language acquisition, as a reminder, is the subconscious process of encoding the subtleties of a language and how they are used in a context into our long-term memory. Now take a peek at Bart in this GIF. Notice that he is speaking Spanish. He's using his new target language in an authentic cultural context. This application of language will much more likely yield Bart being able to speak Spanish proficiently throughout the rest of his life. In summary, at RYSA, we're really trying to aim for language acquisition of English language, more than just learning the rules of the English language and never applying them in the rest of your life. Now you have learned the difference between language learning and what we're really going for at RYSA, language acquisition. Next up, we will learn about the theory of comprehensible input. The theory of comprehensible input states that language is acquired when inputs, or the learnings, are slightly beyond a student's current level of knowledge and skill, and made understandable by context and by explicit teaching strategies, such as using pictures and multimedia, vocabulary that the student already knows, total physical response, and where appropriate, using the student's first language. Notice the graphic in the upper right-hand corner. In the orange, the graphic shows a student's current level of language proficiency. In the purple, the graphic shows students far too outside or too challenging above their current level of language proficiency. In the blue zone of that diagram is where we aim to stay at RYSA, inside the zone of comprehensible input, just slightly beyond what a student already knows, but not too challenging. Let's zoom into these a little further. If not enough supports are provided and learning is too far from what students already know, then the student will not acquire or remember those inputs, those learnings. We would consider this too challenging. On the other hand, if too many supports are given, or the learning is too close to what the student already knows, then the student is barely learning, and we would consider that too easy. Right in the middle is where we want to stay at RYSA for comprehensible input. So you've learned about the theory of comprehensible input. Next, we will learn about the theory of affective filter. The theory of affective filter states that student must have a low-risk environment in which to acquire a second language. The emotional state of a student will determine how well they're able to acquire a new language. This is true for all types of learning, but it is especially true when learning a new language. First, look at SpongeBob in the top right-hand corner. A low affective filter means that the student is emotionally well and they are able to acquire a new language well, therefore. Now look at SpongeBob in the lower right-hand corner. A high affective filter means that the student is emotionally stressed and therefore they are not able to acquire a new language as well. You've learned about the theory of affective filter. Next, we will learn about language domains. Language develops in 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. As a RYSA peer mentor, a big part of your job is to ensure that students are receiving support in all 4 domains. There are 2 domains responsible for allowing students to access information. Those 2 are listening and reading. And there are 2 domains that are responsible for allowing students to express their information. Those 2 domains are speaking and writing. At RYSA, we assess RYSA students on listening and written language at the beginning and the end of the academy. Now you have learned about language domains. Next, we will learn about BICS versus CALPS. BICS, or Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, are social, conversational, everyday type of language. Fluency takes about 1 to 3 years to develop in this type of language, and it often includes a silent period where the students are not speaking in their new target language yet. Notice the example shown in the GIF above. Great party, Jennifer. Thanks, I like your shoes. Those are examples of BICS, conversational, social, everyday type of language. On the other hand, CALP, which stands for Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, is the language of school, textbooks, academics. This language takes a minimum of 5 years to develop, even an intermediary fluency, and it can take a whole lifetime to develop fully. Notice the example in the lower right-hand corner where Homer is using some of his newly learned CALPs. Notice the graphic of the iceberg. It is incredibly important to notice that at RYSA, we support students to learn both BICS and CALPs, but that the majority of that iceberg and the majority of language, and so therefore language supports, should be directed at aiming to help students develop their CALPs, their cognitive academic language proficiency. It is worth noting that often when a student has a strong command of their BICS, their conversational social language, teachers can wrongly assume that a student is also proficient in their CALPs. but this can result in the teacher taking away language supports too soon. So always remember to support students' CALTs at RYSA. You've learned about FIX and CALTs. Now we will talk about language acquisition levels. At RYSA, we assess students' English acquisition levels 2 times, at the beginning of the program and at the end of the program. We assign students an English language acquisition level utilizing the WIDA framework. There is a diagram on the screen. Notice that a 0 English language access level represents the silent period, meaning that this student who is at a level 0 in English is not responding in the target language, in English. The top of this scale shows that a level 5 is the highest level, and level 6 would mean speaking, reading, writing, listening, as though that student were a native English speaker. So they would have exited from requiring linguistically supportive education. The majority of our students at RYSA average at a level 2. There are 2 reasons that we assess students' English language acquisition level at RYSA. First, we want to support each student at their level. And second, we want to calculate growth from the beginning of the program to the end of the program. You've learned about language acquisition levels. Now, let's learn about lesson planning using a linguistically supportive approach at RYSA. This diagram shows the template that we at RYSA use to plan for linguistically supportive education for multilingual learners. In the yellow box, and then highlighted and zoomed in, indicated here, you'll notice that the lesson plan includes many different strategies that teachers at RYSA can select and implement to support multilingual learners. As a RYSA peer mentor, you are not responsible for lesson planning. But it's good to be aware that teachers are writing their lesson plans at RYSA with these strategies in mind, specifically designed to support multilingual learners. You've learned about lesson planning using a linguistically supportive approach. Now, let's learn about how RYSA 2020 linguistically supportive focus sentence stems. Here are your directions. Pause this video module now. Click the link in the description below to watch the full sentence stems tutorial video. After completing that video, return to this video module and continue your learning. As you just learned from your sentence stems tutorial video, sentence stems are a strategy for teaching the syntax or grammatical structure of a language. Sentence stems can be used verbally or written. Sentence stems help students become comfortable speaking and writing in complete sentences and help them to explain complicated ideas using more complex sentence structures than they might have been able to create on their own. You have learned about the RYSA 2020 linguistically supportive focus sentence stems. Congratulations! Those were the 8 key concepts and foundational theories of linguistically supportive teaching at RYSA 2020. Now, we will close and you will receive directions to check for your understanding of this module. As a reminder, the objectives of this module where the peer mentors will be able to describe what a linguistically supportive approach is and why it is important for English language learners. Peer mentors will be able to identify key concepts and the 8 foundational theories of linguistically supportive teaching. And last, peer mentors will be able to apply those key concepts and the knowledge of 8 foundational theories of linguistically supportive teaching to ensure that RYSA 2020 students can both access and express their learnings. Way to go. Here are your instructions to check for your understanding of the module. In order to check for understanding of this module, click the link in the description below to play a Jeopardy-style quiz game. Bulleted beneath, you can see the itemized directions for how to get to that Jeopardy-style game. After playing Jeopardy, leave a comment below that tells which of those Jeopardy questions was the hardest for you, and then leave the other players a little hint in that comment to help them get the correct answer to that question that you found challenging. Thank you for joining. This has been the RYSA 2020 Teaching Multilingual Learners for Peer Mentors module.